Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have URG, trades on the New York Stock Exchange American under the symbol URG and on the TSX under the symbol URE, and is a uranium mining company operating the Lost Creek in-situ recovery uranium facility in south central Wyoming, which produced, packaged, and shipped approximately 2.6 million pounds U3O8 from Lost Creek since the commencement of operations. Please welcome its CEO, John Cash. Welcome, John. How are you today?
Hey, doing really well, Anna. It's good to be back on with you.
Great. We look forward to hearing your presentation. Take it away.
All right. Thank you very much. So we always like to start our presentation by showing our Lost Creek facility to demonstrate we are a real mining company. We're not an explorer per se or a developer. We are a miner with projects in development. So we like to show our processing plant that we built in 2013. And as Anna indicated, we've shipped nearly 2.6 million pounds of U3O8 since we went into production. We do have a disclaimer. I might make some forward-looking statements during the presentation, so please be aware of that. And we encourage you to take a look at our risk statements and before you invest. But the company at a glance, we have two flagship properties. Both of them are in situ uranium mining properties in the state of Wyoming, a very friendly jurisdiction. And Lost Creek is the first one we've put into production. We've produced 2.7 million pounds and shipped 2.6 million since being in production. For a few years, we allowed the production rate to decline because we ran out of our long-term contracts and the price of uranium was very low. However, the price of uranium has been coming back around, and we've signed up some very good long-term contracts that gave us the faith we needed to restart operations, getting it ramped up. So that is really the focus of the company today, is drilling, constructing, preparing to bring that facility back up to significant production levels. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But Lost Creek has a very good resource in the ground, 11.9 million pounds of measured and indicated, and an additional 6.6 million pounds of inferred. We also have tremendous opportunity to explore on the property. We have redox fronts, which are a chemical front in the geologic horizons that contain mineralization. We know that there are a number of those, dozens of those that we have not chased yet. And so we have a lot of opportunity, we believe, to expand that resource going forward. We have done 6 exploration programs throughout the ownership of that property. Every time we explore, we have been successful at finding pounds, and our discovery cost is about 50 cents a pound. Lost Creek is well known as being a low-cost producer, probably one of the lowest cost producers in the Western world. And when we were producing at a very steady clip back in the 2015 to 2018 era, we had cash costs down in the $16 range. That is the C1 cash cost. The all-in mine site cost were around $33 a pound. Now, there obviously has been some inflation since that time, and we're not going to be able to get quite down to those numbers, but we believe we can get very close. The project has a 14-year mine life, as we know the resources right now, but as I indicated, we believe we have opportunity to grow that going forward. The well field is licensed, or when I say well field, that is another name for the mine itself, is licensed to produce 1.2 million pounds per year. And the processing plant, which is the photograph in the top right, is licensed to produce 2.2 million pounds per year. The difference between the two is very intentional, and that is so we can bring in pounds from another competitor's property or from one of our other remote properties and do toll processing at Lost Creek. And that's where we transition here to Shirley Basin, our second flagship property, because our plan is to build out just a very small satellite facility at Shirley Basin and transport those pounds over to Lost Creek for processing. But Shirley Basin has a very good resource in the ground, has 8.8 million pounds of measured and indicated resource, no inferred, all measured and indicated. That's because the project has been very heavily drilled. We know where the resources are, and our geologists have already planned out all of the pattern designs for the entire life of that mine. But Shirley Basin, the well field itself, is licensed at 1 million pounds per year. We intend to build out a satellite at this point that has a capacity of 1 million pounds per year. However, the license will allow us to expand the plant up to 2 million pounds per year in the future if we desire to do that. We don't have to go back to get any more regulatory approval. So at Shirley Basin, we have all of the permits and licenses we need in hand to construct and operate. We'll make that decision to construct and operate once we layer in additional sales contracts that justify that ramp up. So moving away from the two flagship properties to talk just a bit about the company and our contracting. Earlier this year, we did sell 100,000 pounds into the Department of Energy's uranium reserve. We got exceptional pricing on that of $64.47 a pound, and we've received payment for that. There is discussion about expanding that program going forward. We'll see if that happens or not. We're a bit agnostic on that. We are not relying on government sales to have positive revenue. We are relying on commercial contracts with utilities and nuclear companies. And that takes me to the agreements that we have in place. Over the last several months, we've signed up two very good long-term sales contracts totaling 600,000 pounds a year beginning in 2024. And so we are building and constructing right now at the facility in the mine portion to be able to ramp up to that production level next year. This year, we start off with just a very low contract level of 200,000 pounds. And so we already have that in inventory, but we plan to produce from that into that as well. So I've mentioned a few times that we are an in-situ miner. And for those of you who are not familiar with in-situ mining, it is a Latin term that means in the place. So we don't move rock. We don't create a big hole in the ground or have tunnels and adits, things like that. To recover the uranium, we install water wells. And what you see in the picture here is an operating mine unit at Lost Creek. It is actively recovering uranium. In each of those brown circular boxes you see out there, containers, those are wellheads. They consist of injection wells and production wells. We inject water, CO2, and baking soda, and a little bit of oxygen. That mixture of chemicals, it dissolves the U3O8 and brings it to surface. When we get done mining here, we will simply plug those wells, do a little bit more revegetation, do some groundwater restoration, and when we leave, within a few years, you won't even be able to tell we were there. It will be free release. The land can be used for anything. So switching away from the properties and the company just for a few slides, I'd like to talk a little bit about nuclear power and the investment thesis surrounding that. But a few years ago, the world began to recognize that if you want to go carbon free, renewables are fantastic, but they have significant limitations. For example, the sun doesn't shine at night, the wind doesn't always blow, and so far we've not gotten a good way to store that energy, so we've got good reliable base load from renewables. So if you want good reliable base load, you can go, and a carbon free, you can go to hydro, but hydro is very limited because the rivers have been dammed already. But then that leaves you nuclear, which is very reliable, very robust, very strong uptimes, in fact, better than any other source of energy. And the world really began to move toward nuclear. In the US, already 20% of our electricity is generated from nuclear power. A lot of people don't recognize that. Globally, about 10% of the world's electricity is from nuclear power. So there is a significant build-out program right now globally. There are 60 reactors in construction, 104 more reactors on order, and 300 have been proposed. The World Nuclear Association does a report every other September. They'll be doing a report this year. But their last report from a year and a half ago, they were projecting 4.2% annual growth in nuclear energy generation and fuel demand. In the upper case, they were looking at nearly 8% annual growth. That was before Russia invaded Ukraine. We believe now when they come out with this next report this September, those numbers will have increased significantly because the world is moving toward nuclear, not because it's just green, but also because they want energy security. But the nuclear industry, they are also looking at more than just electric generation. They are moving toward hydrogen production. Constellation and Duke are taking the lead on that here in the US. And not in the near term, but in the mid to long term, we're looking at small modular reactors, SMRs, that will become quite common and there's an expectation that there will be tremendous growth there. Around the world, reactors are being built in a number of countries. China is the gorilla in the room. They are slated to build 150 reactors in 15 years. Even here in the U.S., just a few weeks ago, Southern Company brought on a reactor down in Georgia, Vogtle number 3, and then they plan on bringing another one on at the end of this year. So there's a rapid rate of growth in the industry globally. Here in the U.S., we're seeing a lot of government support via the Inflation Reduction Act and other legislation that's already been passed. Those are designed to keep our 93 reactors up and running. We are hearing from our utility customers that they are not shutting down reactors in the foreseeable future. They're going to keep them up and running. And not only are they going to keep them up and running, they are going to expand the amount of electricity they can generate by doing power uprates, license renewals, and also extending the time between refueling. But going forward for government support, we have some really good allies on both sides of the aisle. This is a very bipartisan matter, but Manchin and Barrasso are very strong advocates and voices for our industry. And right now, there's legislation being considered to cut off the supply of Russia into the country. And we expect within weeks a decision will be made on that. It's impossible to predict what that decision will be, but we're optimistic that that supply will be cut off. And the Western world will need to rely on Western supply instead of Russian supply. But as the world began to move toward carbon-free nuclear, the financial players began to jump in. The real game changer for us was the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. And since its formation, they have acquired greater than 60 million pounds of U3O8. That is a one-way trust. So the way the company was formed and approved by the Canadian government is that they can only buy pounds. They cannot sell it back into the market. So it is a buy and hold trust, and it is effectively is a call on the market. Geopolitics. We can't talk about uranium without talking about geopolitics. And Russia really is an important part of the story because they are a major refiner, not miner, but refiner of uranium. They do the conversion and enrichment services for a number of utilities around the world. If that supply is cut off, as is being discussed in Congress right now, and also is being discussed in Europe, then it's going to be very difficult for the Western world to replace that. Kazakhstan, a former Soviet satellite to Russia, they are the biggest miner of uranium. They provide nearly half of the world's uranium. So if Kazakhstan gets caught up in those sanctions, or if Russia closes trade routes for that material coming through Russia, Russia has a lot of influence in Kazakhstan. So it's quite reasonable to expect that Russia may weigh in heavily on Kazakh production going forward if our relationship continues to sour. If that happens, we expect that to have a significant impact on the uranium supply in the market going forward. Here in the U.S., over the last few years, production has been in steep decline because the Western world and the U.S. miners, we cannot compete with Russia and the state-owned entities in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. So mines around the world, including in the U.S., had been dialing down production because of the inability to compete with those governments. But that's where our story comes back in. At Lost Creek, we are constructed. Our plant is built. It's already produced nearly 3 million pounds of uranium. We are cranking it back up. We've got a great resource in the ground. Our recovery rates over the last 9 years have been fantastic. We're averaging 90% recovery. Typically in the in-situ industry, we only get about 60 to 80%. So we are setting the new standard when it comes to in-situ production here in the U.S. Earlier on, I mentioned that we are a low-cost producer, and we always like to put in the actual numbers. These are audited, real numbers. This is not a model. These are historic numbers in the recent past. And I would call your attention to 2015. You can see our cash cost near the bottom of $16.27 a pound. That year, our all-in mine site cost was about $33 a pound, and our corporate cost, everything in, the lights here, taxes, royalties, capital, everything, we were in the 40s. So we're in the money now. Even at today's spot price and long-term price, we're in the money. But the long-term contracts we have signed are at escalated prices because we are a Western producer. and the world wants that security of supply. So we got a premium well above published spot and long-term pricing. So we believe we're going to make some good profits, good revenue from those pounds that we've got locked into contract. Shirley Basin, just a couple of more thoughts there. The reason we acquired the project is not because it's a large project. It's a little bit on the smaller side, but it is very shallow. It is completely drilled out. We don't need to spend money exploring or delineating. We know where all the ore is at. And we believe we can put it into production at a very low capital cost, building out the satellite plant and ramping up production in the first units of the well field for around $30 to $35 million. And we believe we can do that in a time frame of about 18 months. That's one of the beauties of in situ mining is the capital expenditure is very low when you compare it to conventional. And also we can do things very quickly. To put that into context, when we built out Lost Creek, back in 2012, 2013, we built it out in 9 months is all it took us to build the entire processing plant. So we're excited to go into Shirley Basin. We'll make that decision as we sign up additional contracts going forward that justify the capital expenditure to bring it online. So we are currently ramping up at Lost Creek. Our header house 2.4 is nearly done. The wells are installed and we're moving on to header house 2.5. We're just finalizing the plumbing and wiring right now in 2.4. We've already delineated the next 5 header houses, so we're ready to design patterns and lay them out. We are very well aware of the shortage of supply of equipment, so we've been ahead of that, purchasing things sometimes a year and a half out, so we're ready to go. We've been hiring. In October of last year, we had 9 employees at the mine site. Today, we have 47. We need to hire about another 8 or so employees to get back up to production. Taking a look at ESG, I won't focus on everything on this slide, but I do like to point out that the pounds we will recover at Lost Creek and Shirley Basin, compared to the energy generated from coal, if you compare those two, we will offset over 300 million metric tons of CO2, which is the equivalent of taking 67 million cars off the road for a year. That's an important part of the nuclear story, and we're very proud to be a part of that story. I would be remiss not to talk about research and development because it's near and dear to our heart and the very fabric of what we do. We are leaders in research and development. The top 4 bullets point out some of the successes that we have had over the last few years. Our peers here in the U.S. now follow us in a number of those, and we have 2 research and development programs ongoing. The first one is focused on developing a new well casing and installation technology. We've applied for a patent, so it is temporarily protected under that application. We have completed phase 1 testing, which showed that we can install wells, injection wells, very cheaply with a 75% reduction in drill rig time. That means 75% less air emissions, 75% less noise, tremendous reduction in the footprint from drilling, but it also impacts the cost. We believe we can save about $2.50 to $3.50 a pound by utilizing this technology. But we're not done. Very importantly, we also have to develop those wells now and prove that they will take water. That is in phase 2, and we're moving into that now. And we'll be reporting more to the public on that in the coming months. We've also worked on an advanced water treatment and filtration program. We're looking at reducing our water consumption and waste generation. That's important, not only from an environmental standpoint, but also because water disposal is expensive. So anything we can do to reduce that cost, reduce consumption, is a good thing all around. So taking a look at our market position, market cap ranging anywhere 230 million, 280 million. The market's been very volatile lately, as all commodities have been. We have a very strong cash position. As of the first of last month, we had 79 million. We had just concluded a raise, and we are listed on the Russell. We have pretty good liquidity, about 1.4 million shares traded per day. In addition to that cash position of $79 million, we also have an inventory of nearly 250,000 pounds of U3O8 that we can convert into cash if and when we decide to do that. but we're going to hold on to those pounds for now. We'll either sell them into our contracts or potentially to the U.S. government if they reestablish a program. So a few takeaways: we are very well financed. We are ramping up production. We've got great inventory, and we just concluded a sale to the Department of Energy at very escalated prices. So we've been able to maintain our core staff. We've been doing a lot of hiring to assist us with the ramp up, and we believe we are extremely well positioned to fill those contracts and sign up additional high-priced contracts going forward. Keep in mind that our well field capacity is 2.2 million pounds, and we've only booked up 600,000 pounds under contract, under high-priced contracts. And we believe the price of uranium is going to go higher. That view is shared by most people in the industry. And as that moves higher, we will work toward filling up our book and bringing Lost Creek up to full production, and then also building out and ramping up Shirley Basin as well. So with that, Anna, I'll turn it back over to you, and I would be glad to entertain any questions that people have.
Great job, John. Yes, fascinating stuff here. Question, how will your R&D projects reduce your environmental footprint?
Yeah, you know, the drill rig program, the casing technology, it's going to help because we reduce the drill rig time. And drill rigs are a significant footprint on our site. So if we can reduce the time they're out there working, that's a good thing. It reduces the amount of time that they're visible. It reduces air emissions. They burn diesel, so we reduce that significantly. Also, water consumption. The technology we're developing will result in considerably less drill water used when installing the wells. So there are a number of benefits across the board: air, water, surface vegetation, minimizes disturbance to vegetation. So tremendous benefits all the way around. On the water treatment side, we're looking at significant reductions in water consumption. Out west, in the arid west, water is precious. And so if we can reduce the amount of water we utilize, that's fantastic. The technology we're looking at will actually take the wastewater we generate, clean up a significant portion of that effectively to drinking water standards, and then we can put that back into a shallow aquifer or discharge it in a drainage so that wildlife can use it or a rancher can use it in the future. So yeah, some great positive impacts there.
That's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. Groundbreaking time in your industry, no pun intended, but what industry and market catalysts should we be looking for in the next coming weeks and months?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of two categories here to be watching. First is basic supply-demand fundamentals. Right now, the supply of uranium is really lagging behind demand because so many mines have been shut down globally or have run out of resources, so they've been depleted. And so the restart of mines and the development of new mines is not keeping up with demand. So that's not something that's going to happen overnight. That's something that's going to evolve over months and years. But I think that's going to drive prices higher because of that imbalance. But geopolitics in the near term is something that people should really keep an eye on. Watch what Congress does with Russia, whether we sanction those imports of material into the U.S. or not. If that happens, that's big. If that trickles into Kazakhstan, that's even bigger. So it's impossible to predict what's going to happen there. But our eyes are certainly watching those two things.
So you mentioned a lot about Lost Creek and Shirley Basin, but talk a little bit more about the long-term plans for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, Lost Creek. We have tremendous opportunity there to explore. We've got 35,000 acres there of land through state leases and BLM claims. There are significant areas there where we know there are redox fronts. We have mapped them, but there's very little drilling in those areas. And so that's our primary source of growth, is very organic. Shirley Basin is completely drilled out, so we don't have much opportunity to grow that. But at Lost Creek, tremendous opportunities there. But beyond that, we are looking at M&A. We would like to grow the company larger. We're already a very low-cost producer. We've proven that. But nonetheless, if we only produce 800,000 or 1 million or 1.5 million pounds a year, we're still dividing that into corporate overhead and administration. So it's a great way to reduce that cost on a per pound basis is to increase production. So if we can go out and make acquisition of some quality, I'm going to emphasize quality projects that we can produce from economically, that'll help drive down our cost of production, make us more profitable going forward. So we're going to be very disciplined when it comes to M&A. We always have been, and we always will be, but we are looking for additional opportunities with regard to M&A.
Great. Well, good luck with all of that. John, do you have any closing remarks for our audience today?
Yeah, so lately there's been a bit of a retraction in the commodity space. Uranium miners are not an exception to that, so our share prices declined some. Looks like it's maybe a great time to jump in because we've got well-established revenues going forward. So we're protected in that regard and we're well cashed up. So it looks like it's a great time to jump into the space and especially into UR Energy.
Wonderful. It sure does. Thank you so much for joining us today on our conference. We look forward to catching up with you again very soon.
All right. Thank you, Anna.
All right. Thank you all for watching. We'll be right back with our next presenter.